Masechet Baba Batra Daf Lamed Chet Amri Nehardea Haiman de Zaben Dikla Lechabre Kanile Meshipule Ad Tehoma. The sages of Nehardea say that if someone sells a date tree to someone else, then the buyer acquires obviously the tree itself, but also some of the land. How much? From the bottom of the tree all the way down into the depths of the earth. Right, so it's the circumference of that tree all the way down. What would that be useful for? Well, two things. First of all, it would mean that the owner of the land cannot tell the owner of the surrounding land, cannot tell the owner of the tree, take your tree and get off, because he owns that, the owner of the tree owns that piece of land, because that's assumed that comes with part of the sale. Some of the Rishonim say that this also includes the right to replant a tree. If this tree dies or is uprooted, then the owner of that tree, since he owns the land rights under the tree all the way down, so therefore he can dig down and plant a new tree in its place. Okay, that's the ruling of the sages of Nehardea. Matkif la Rava velemale kurkema derishka zabine lach akor kurkema derishka vizil. Rava says maybe not. Maybe the seller can say to the buyer, I sold you a tree and only a tree. For example, I sold you just a saffron plant. Saffron plants are just a little small plant, and generally people that own the saffron plant, once it grew, they would uproot it. It's just a small thing, and then they would take it with them. No one assumes that when you sell a saffron plant that you're buying the land around it, because it's just like a little plant. So maybe regarding any tree, the seller can say, when I sold you the tree, I sold you the tree only, just like I would normally sell just a saffron plant, and therefore take your tree, whatever kind of tree it is, and go away, like it's a saffron plant. So the seller would have a valid right to say that. And therefore, we do not assume that just because someone bought a tree, that means that they also bought the land under it. So Rava disagrees with the sages of Nehardea. Ela marava beba mehamat ta'ana. Rather, Rava says that what your tradition is true, but in a different way. It's not that we always assume that the seller sells the land under it, but rather it's for a different law. If someone has a chazakah on a tree, he's using the tree and he benefits from it for 3 years, then if he says, I got this tree because I bought it from you, and I also bought the land, then we believe him. Normally you need a chazakah and a ta'ana, and they have to match. The chazakah has to be about what you claimed in the ta'ana of how you got that item. In this case, since he has a chazakah on the tree, now he doesn't have a direct chazakah on the land, but how would he have a chazakah on the land? It's not like he's going to plow the land, it's under a tree. What does he have to go dig down for what? So he's using the tree, and he is in effect using the land under the tree because the roots are down there. And therefore, if he says only, I used this tree for 3 years and I bought the tree from you, and he only claims the tree, then he only gets the tree, because we don't assume automatically that the seller sold the land also. However, here's Rava's point. If he says, I used this tree for 3 years and I bought the tree and the land under it from you, well then the chazakah on the tree applies to the land under it also, and he is believed. That's Rava's understanding of the law. Amar le mor kashisha bered Rav Chisda Rav Ashe v'ikur kema derishka zabin le mai hava le leme'avad. So now Mor Kashisha, the son of Rav Chisda, asks Rav Ashe, according to Rava, let's say a seller did sell only the saffron plant, only the tree itself, and not the land. Well then, what is he supposed to do? Because then in 3 years, so this buyer is using the tree rightfully, legally for 3 years, but then will always be able to make a claim, a false claim, that he owns the land under it. I bought from you the tree and the land under it. So what's the seller supposed to do to protect himself from a buyer claiming the land under it when the seller did not sell the land? And the answer is, the seller should make sure that within 3 years of the sale of that tree, he should say in front of a bet din or in front of witnesses, listen, I sold the tree only, that land is mine. And he should not think that the land is his, and that way that message will get to the buyer of the tree, and he'll, if he indeed bought his land, then he'll have the deed, and he'll keep his deed to say, no, that's not true, and he can dispute it. But otherwise, well, then he won't have a deed if he didn't buy the land, and then he'll only have the tree. So a seller should protect himself by doing that. And we know that sellers will have to always protect themselves in many cases, because we see this. ועמד לקוחה היא בידי, הכי נמה דמהמן, מתקנה רבנן מילתה, דעתה בא לידי פסדה, אלא איבאלה למחויה, הכנמה איבאלה למחויה. Because if you don't say that the seller needs to protest in order to protect his ownership rights and proof of it over this land, if you don't say that, then how will you explain the mortgages that are done in Surah, which we already saw a few times, where someone writes in the document that when a certain number of years are completed, the land will go back to you without any further payment. Let's say you owe me $10,000, and then you give me some land as a mortgage, and I use the land, I consume the land every year. Let's say it produces $1,000 a year, and the agreement is that I will keep that $1,000 of produce a year and deduct that from the loan, and then after 10 years, I will give you the land back without receiving any payment, because I got the payment from the produce of the land. Now here's a problem. What if I hide that document that says that you get the land back after 10 years, and then after 3 years or 4 years, I say, oh, this is my land, I bought it from you, and I have a chazakah because I've already been consuming the produce for 3 years. So would he be believed? Would the rabbis institute an ordinance that would come to a loss? It would be so easy for people to lie. And of course, they're not allowed to lie. Just because you have a chazakah doesn't make it yours. But would the rabbis make an institution where it would be so easy to lie, hide my document because it's the mortgage holder that holds on to that document, and hide it, and then be able to claim it's mine? So the rabbis wouldn't make a takana that would make it so easy for people to lose their right to their own land. Rather, it must be that, in this case, the borrower should, within the first 3 years, should go before bet din or before witnesses and tell them, right, listen, this land that guy is using is my land. I gave it to him for 10 years as a mortgage, right? And so therefore he has a right to use it, to consume it, but it's my land, and I'm officially making a protest to say that he does not own it. He has to do that. And therefore, just like in that case, the institution of this mortgage depends on the assumption that a person will protest within the first 3 years. So too here, this law of Rava assumes that people will protest within the first 3 years. A person can sell just a tree, just a saffron plant to someone else without selling the land, unlike the sages of Nahada, who says that he always sells the land. No, Rava says you can sell just the plant, just the tree, without the land. And if you do that, you should make sure to protest within the first 3 years and say, I only sold the tree, but I did not sell the land is mine. Next Mishnah, Shalosh Arasot LaChazaka, Yehuda ve'Eber HaYarden ve'Hagalil. Haya b'Yehuda ve'chezik b'Galil. B'Galil ve'chezik b'Yehuda, ena chazaka, ad sheyeh imo b'medina achat. There are 3 provinces when it comes to the law of chazaka, and that's Judea in the south, and the other side of the Jordan, and the Galilee in the north. And here's some examples. If someone, an owner of land, the original owner, was in Judea, and someone came and squatted on that guy's land, and that land was in the Galilee. This guy owns land in the Galilee, and he lives in Judea, and someone came and squatted on his land, and he did so for 3 years, that does not create a chazakah. And the same thing the other way around. If he lived in the Galilee, and he owned land in Judea, and someone came and squatted on his land in Judea, and he did not protest, so just because someone squatted even for more than 3 years does not create a chazakah. Why? Because the whole point of the chazakah is that if I hear that someone is squatting on my land, I will go and protest. And if nobody protests within 3 years, then that means that the squatter is the rightful owner. But if it's in different provinces, then the communication is very limited. And so it could be that he's living in Judea. He may never hear that there's someone squatting on his land in the Galilee, right? Maybe the neighbors will notice and they'll talk about it, but the travel is very little between the two, and so he might never hear about it to protest. Or even if he hears about it and he goes locally to a bet din, or to some witnesses and tells them, listen, I heard someone squatting on my land. I want you to know I protest and this is my land. That protest may not get back to the squatter. So to inform the squatter, hey, there's a protest, hold on to your deed. He may not hear about it. The squatter may not hear that anybody protested, and then he will not be careful to hold on to his deed. And assuming that nobody protested, he will lose it, and he will assume that, I have a chazakah. And so therefore, because there's no communication, chazakah does not work, and that would be the same if it was across the Jordan River, that the guy lived on one side and he had land on the other side. All that is the opinion of Tana Kama. אמר רבי יהודה, לא אמרו 3 שנים, אלא כדי שיהיה באספמיה, ויחזיק שנה, ילכו ויודיעוהו שנה, ויבוא לשנה אחרת. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, I disagree. He says that a chazakah works anywhere, not only between provinces within Israel, but even as far as Spain, which would be the westernmost border of the Roman Empire, very far away. And he says, why did the rabbi say 3 years is required for a chazakah? So that we cover the most extreme case. That if someone is in Spain, and he owns land in Israel, so if someone comes and squats on his land he's not just he'll squats for 1 day. That's not going to be that's not going to arouse intention. But let's say he squats for 1 year on someone's land, and then people will notice. The neighbor's like, what's this guy doing? Why is he living on that guy's land? We should give him a message. So someone will take that message and it will get spread to Spain. But that takes a year for someone to travel to Spain, or for the rumor to travel to Spain. And then the guy in Spain, the owner, will say, he just heard that someone is squatting on his land, and it will take him a year to get back, to come to Israel to protest, or to send word, or to make a protest there, and for the word of the protest to come back. So the reason why we have 3 years in the first place, which is quite a long time, is just in case someone's far away. The truth is that if someone was close by, then the chazakah really could be much less. But the rabbis took the maximum amount so that it would be one time period for all cases. So the point of the Yehuda is that word does travel. It might be slow, but rumors travel, protests travel, and therefore 3 years, chazakah of 3 years works, no matter where the owner is, even if he's far away from his land. So total disagreement with the Tana Kama. Now we ask, מה כסבר תנא קמא? אי כסבר מחאה שלא בפניו הוויה מחאה, אפילו יהודה והגליל נמה. אי כסבר מחאה שלא בפניו לא הוויה מחאה, אפילו יהודה ויהודה נמי לה. We already were introduced earlier to a machloket about whether the original owner, when he makes a protest, does he have to do so in front of the squatter? Does he actually have to go confront the squatter face to face and say, get off my land, this is my land? Or can he do it in bet din or witnesses far away, somewhere else? even if it's not in front of the squatter, because we assume that eventually he'll hear about it. So that was a machloket. So now this Tana Kama, what does he think? If he thinks that a protest that's not in front of him is a protest, that you could protest anywhere, well then a protest even from the Galilee and to Judea should work, even if it's far away. Then in a different province, then the protest should work. And if the protest works, then the chazakah is a valid chazakah, because he didn't hear about it. And if he thinks that a protest that's not in front of him is not a protest, meaning that protest has to be face-to-face with the squatter, then even within Yehuda, let's say they're both living in Yehuda, one's over on this, one's in Jerusalem, and one's nearby, in Yavne or some other city in Judea, so then that should be a macha'ah even within one province. And so either case, why would it make a difference? Within one province there is a chazakah, and between two provinces there's no chazakah. But all we know so far is that there's a difference between doing it in front of him or not in front of him. And so if it's in front of him, then half has to be in front of him, then even two places in Judea won't be good. And if it doesn't have to be in front of him, then even far away should be okay. Amar Rabbi Abba bar Memal Amar Rav le'olam kasabra machash shelo b'fanav havya macha'a u'mishnatenu b'shat chayrum shanu. So Rabbi Abba, the son of Amma, says the name of Rav. Remember that this statement is said in the name of Rav. That point is going to come up later. So in fact, the Tanna Kama thinks, according to Rav, that a protest that's not in front of him is a valid protest. Generally, you don't have to do it in front of a person. And therefore, really, protest could be done anywhere. That's the letter of the law. However, this Mishnah is talking about a special case of a time of emergency. There's some kind of emergency where travel is not allowed. The government says no one can travel. There's a curfew. You have to stay where you are. And because people are not able to travel, that's why a protest that's far away is no good. But normally, if it's not a time of emergency, then it would be okay. Now we ask, wait a second, if it's a time of emergency when no one's allowed to travel, then why mention just Judea and Galilee? If no one can travel, then no one should be able to travel even close by within a province. And the answer is, mashma'lan, tistam Yehuda v'Galil kishat cherum damum. In fact, the Mishnah is teaching not during a time of, this answer in a way undoes the previous one, but just explains it further and limits it and says, this Mishnah is teaching us that in a regular time, even not a time of emergency, the provinces of Yehuda and Galil, no one travels, just like no one travels at all during a time of crisis. So that's the point, which is really the simple reading of the Mishnah, which is that, listen, if you're in a time of crisis and no one's allowed, you have to stay in your home. There is a curfew, or you can just travel only a little bit in your town, but not from town to town. If it's such a time, then a protest would not work even within a province. Okay, so now what if it's not a time of crisis? Not a time of crisis, still there's not a lot of communication and travel between Judea and Galilee. Happened to be that there were Samaritans that lived in between, and so travel between provinces was more dangerous and rarer. And so when you're not even at a regular time, not during a crisis, because a communication does not happen a lot between the different provinces, that's why a chazakah is not good between provinces ever. And if it was a time of crisis, then even within a province, the chazakah would not be living on land for 3 years would not create a chazakah, because the chazakah only serves as proof if there was a possibility of the owner hearing it and protesting, and the word of the protest getting back. But if there's no communication, then we cannot assume that, and therefore the chazakah is not valid. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, En machazikin benichse boreach. So Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav the following halacha, that one cannot make a chazakah on property that's owned by someone who ran away. Let's say someone lives in Jerusalem and he owns property in Yerushalayim, and he got in some trouble. Maybe he owes people some money, some thugs, and they're looking for him to break his legs to make him pay up. Or maybe the government is looking for him for some, to arrest him for something he did or didn't do, whatever. Anyway, for whatever reason, he ran away, and he ran to Yavne. He's hiding out there in Yavne, and so he left his property alone. Someone else comes and squats on his property for 3 years. Can that person claim and say, look, I'm here for 3 years, nobody protested, therefore it's mine? And Rav says no. If someone ran away because he's afraid of someone coming after him and he went to hide somewhere else, then there is no chazakah. We're going to have to explain why Rav thinks this. Presumably it'll be difficult to communicate or difficult for him to lodge a protest because he's on the run and isn't going to want to come back to protest the squatter. Okay, so now this statement, what Rav Yehuda learned from Rav. Ki amrita kamed Shmuel amar li, v'chil limchot befanav hu sarich. Now Rav Yehuda originally studied under Rav. After Rav died, Rav is a first generation Amora in Bavel in Surah, and after he died, Rav Yehuda went to study under Shemuel. Shemuel was also a first generation Amora, and Rav Yehuda second generation. And then when Rav Yehuda went to study with Shemuel, he would often repeat to Shemuel halachot that he heard from Rav. And so when Rav Yehuda said this to Shemuel, Shemuel replied with a question. Is Rav assuming that someone, a owner, has to protest in front of the squatter? Shemuel doesn't think so, and so therefore Shemuel disagrees. Shemuel would say that even if someone ran away from his home, from Yerushalayim, and still he can hear about a rumor that someone is squatting on his land, and he can go to a local bet din and tell them, listen, that land back in Yerushalayim is mine, and he's still far enough away from home, and he can go back into hiding that they won't find him, and so he would protest. And therefore, since he doesn't have to come back home, so a protest would be lodged and would be heard, and therefore the chazakah, if there's no protest, the chazakah is valid according to Shemuel. And so Shemuel's asking, according to Rav, why does Rav think that? Does Rav think that a person has to go all the way back home and protest in front of the squatter face to face? This is a good question. So now let's see what Rav is thinking. V'Rav, Maika mashmalan, macha shel b'fanav lahavya macha'a, v'amar Rav mecha shel b'fanav havya macha'a. So what is Rav teaching us with this ruling? Is he teaching us that a protest that's not in front of a person is not a protest? Is he teaching us that a protest has to be face to face with the squatter? But Rav said earlier in the previous sugya that we just learned, he said that a protest that's not in his presence is still a protest. So Rav agrees that it doesn't have to be face to face. So then why can't someone on the run make a protest, and then and therefore why can't a chazakah work on land of someone who ran away? And the answer is Rav Ta'amad Tanadidan kamefaresh velet la sevira le. Rav, in fact, was only explaining the logic of our Tana. When above, in the previous sugya, when Rav said this statement, he was explaining that according to the Tana of our Mishnah, macha'a, a protest that's not in front of a person, is a protest. According to Tana Kama, that's true. It doesn't have to be in front of a person, and that's why from province to within a province, you don't have to be in front of him. He was explaining the Tana Kama, but he himself did not think so. Rav himself believed that a macha'a, a protest, has to be in front of someone, and that's why he ruled that someone who runs away, in fact, cannot lodge a protest because he's not going to come back to town to make the protest in front. He's certainly not going to come back to his own property where whoever is looking out for him is going to find him and arrest him. And so he's not going to come back to lodge a protest, and therefore the chazakah is not a valid chazakah according to Rav. Good. This is all one version of this discussion. And now we have another version that's the opposite. Vika demre, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, machazikin b'nichse boreach. In this version, Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav that someone can, a squatter can make a chazakah on property of someone who ran away. Even if the guy ran away because there's people looking for him to arrest him, and someone else is living on his land, that person living on his land, if he stays there for 3 years and there's no protest and he claims, I bought it from that guy, he is believed. So this is the opposite. Now, ki amrita kamed Shmuel amar li peshita v'chid limchot befanav hu sarich. When Rav Yehuda then reported this halacha of Rav to Shmuel, Shmuel said, that's obvious. What, does a person need to make a protest in front of someone else? Obviously he doesn't. And therefore, why would you think that a chazakah, of an owner who ran away, would not be a chazakah? The owner should be able to hear about it and should be able to protest. And therefore, if he doesn't protest, then it is a good chazakah. Isn't that obvious? V'Rav, my kamashmalan, mechashel b'fanav havya macha'a, v'amara harav chada b'zimena. So now Rav, what is he in fact trying to teach us that we didn't already know? Is he teaching us here that a protest that's not in front of a person is a protest? Rav already taught us that once in the statement that we just quoted above. So we already know that. Rather, you know why Rav is saying a second time? To teach us an extra chidush, that if someone makes a protest in front of two people who don't have the possibility even of going back and telling the squatter, nevertheless, it is a protest. Now, you see, everybody agrees that if someone makes a protest in front of two people who have full ability, they can walk, they can talk, they're healthy, and now it's not that those witnesses have to actually go back to the squatter and tell him, listen, we heard that. It doesn't matter whether they actually do or not. But everybody would agree that if they can do so, then it is a good macha'ah. The question is about, let's say the original owner, he hears that someone's on his land, and he goes to two people who can't walk, or who are traveling far away, who have, for some reason or another, are not able, even if they wanted to, even if they tried to, they would not be able to communicate the protest back to the squatter. So Rav teaches us this law twice to tell us that even if the original owner told people who cannot travel, who cannot communicate, that he's making a protest, nevertheless, it is a valid protest. That's why I said it twice, so it's not pashut. Da'amar Rav Anan, לדidi מפרשלים הנה דמור שמואל, מיכה בפני שני בני אדם, שיכולים לומר לו, הוויה מחאה, מיכה שבפני שני בני אדם, שאין יכולים לומר לו, להוויה מחאה, ורב, חברה יתלה, וחברה דחברה, חברה יתלה. And we know that there is a difference between Shemuel and Rav in this regard, because Rav Anan said that I heard this explanation from Shemuel himself. According to Shemuel, he's the one that asked Peshita and Rav in the first place, because he doesn't think there is anything new to learn from saying this twice. Because Shemuel thinks that if someone makes a protest in front of two regular, normal people who can, if they wanted to, go and tell the squatter that there is a protest, then it is a valid protest. But if the original owner gives his protest in front of two people who do not have the possibility of traveling and communicating this to the squatter, then it's not a protest. So according to Shemuel, there's no need to say anything twice, because there's nothing else to teach, right? The law is only the protest has to be in front of people that could potentially go back and tell the protester. However, Rav said this law twice to teach us this extra chidush, that even if the protest is in front of people that cannot travel and tell the original guy, nevertheless, it is a protest. That's why I said it twice. Now, why would it be a protest? Rav explains that your friend, a friend has a friend, and that friend himself has a friend. So even if these people can't walk, can't travel, can't go and tell them, still they can tell one person, and that person has a friend, and there's just 2 or 3 degrees of separation between everybody in the Jewish nation, and therefore eventually the word will get back to them, even if not from the original witnesses themselves. Amar Rava, Hilcheta en machazikin b'nechse borech u'macha'a shelo b'fanav havya macha'a tarteh. So Rava says the halacha is that one cannot make a chazakah on property of someone who ran away. That's the first one. And second of all, he says the halacha is that a protest that's not in front of a person is a valid protest. Now we ask, this is difficult because he seems to contradict himself. If in fact the halacha is that a protest does not have to be in front of the protester, in front of the squatter, then a chazakah of someone who runs away should be valid because the guy who ran away will be able to hear about it and give a protest wherever he is. He doesn't have to go back home to his land to give the protest. So these two halachos seem to contradict each other. And we answer, La kashya, kan borech mechamat mamon, kan borech mechamat meradin. It depends why the person ran away. If the second halacha is if a person ran away because he owes money. If he owes money, that's not so severe. They're not out to kill him. They just want him to pay up. So let's say this guy, he owes $10,000. Okay, he runs away, or he's accused of owing $10,000. Doesn't matter if it's true or not. The point is that people are after him to pay $10,000. So he runs away. Okay, now he hears that someone's on his land. Okay, but his land it might be worth $50,000. So he may very well go and protest because he could be worth even more. Furthermore, the people that are looking out for him, right, it's not to kill him, so the risk is less, and so he can go to a couple of people wherever he is, make a protest, and then he can go back into hiding. And he would be willing to risk his identity of being found out in order to save his property. So that's why the second halacha is talking about even someone who ran away. But he ran away just because he owes money. In that case, he does not have to protest in person, and therefore, therefore, someone who takes his property can and holds on to it for 3 years, that would be a valid chazakah because otherwise he's expected to make a protest. Whereas when Rava says the first halacha that one cannot make a chazakah for someone who ran away, that's talking about someone who ran away because of murder. He's accused of murder. True or not, maybe he murdered someone bishogeg, and then there's people out to avenge the death of their relative. So people are out for his life. So he runs away, and that person will not risk revealing his whereabouts by going to a bet din or going to two people. I mean, the whole point of making a protest is that people should hear about it, and the word get back to the person who's living on his land. And so he's not going to risk revealing his whereabouts, and so that person we cannot expect to make a protest. And therefore, if he ran away because someone's after his life, then we cannot expect him to protest. And that's the case where Rava said we do not make a chazakah for someone who runs on land of someone who ran away because of murder. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.